Hi, welcome to Behind the Storyteller, a Notified podcast. This is the series where we take professionals from the worlds of IR and PR, or the corporate storytellers, and we give them the mic to tell their stories. I'm here in the studio with my co-hosts, Caroline Cullinan.
How's it going?
And Pat O'Rourke.
Hey, how are you?
And today we are joined virtually with today's guest, or our character for the story, Karen Swim. Karen, welcome.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you all virtually.
Yes, still counts as far as I'm concerned. Now, I know some of our audiences may have seen and heard from you before. I believe you've participated in webinars with Notified before. But for those of you who haven't, would you mind taking a moment just to kind of introduce yourself and let us know a little bit of your background?
Sure. I'm Karen Swim, and I'm based in Michigan. I'm a California transplant, always will be a California girl at heart. I've been in communications for the better part of my career, so a couple of decades plus. I started when I was 10 years old. I was a child prodigy.
I was going to say 5. So
Thank you so much. And I started out working in corporate America in healthcare, which is a great environment to learn communications because you are not only deal with regulations, but a corporate structure and balancing the demands of so many audiences. And I did that for many years happily. And when I stepped out of corporate America, I decided to start my own business. And initially, I was going to focus on writing as my business, which is why my company is Words for Hire. But that quickly developed into so much more because I realized that people needed more than just content. They really needed help in strategically deploying that. And they needed help to really learn what those stories really meant and how they could move the audience. And so I have been happily running my own agency for many years now. I love it. I love everything about this profession. I truly think that storytellers are such special people, and we have the ability to not only capture the now, but we are the people that I feel like can unify people and bridge those gaps and bring sanity and clarity to the world. And so that makes me feel like, especially in these times, we have a very special moment and a very special assignment.
I love that we brought you on for this. After everything that you just said. I'm like, okay, there's a soundbite. Perfect. I want to backtrack just for a moment here, because when you mentioned that when you branched out from corporate America and you started Words for Hire, so it started off primarily for writing.
Yes.
What was that transition like, steering away from writing? Was that a difficult process to really pull the trigger and make that shift?
You know, it was. And it was one of those moments where I realized, and you have these, I now know very often in your career, where I chose writing because that's always been a passion of mine from the time that I was a child. You know, I was that kid that you give me a coloring book and before I can color the pictures, I need to write the story. Like, who are these people? I can't just color them. I need to know what their backstory is. I'm going to write it. They're going to have names, they're going to have a history, and then I can color because I know who they are. So this was like a dream, like I'm going to write and I'll write every day. But let me tell you, writing as a hobby versus writing for a living, and that's all you do, is very different. And what I found is that with clients, I was writing things and it was good and it was exactly what they wanted. But then I watched them not know what to do. And I had this communications marketing background. And so I found myself like, okay, let me tell you what to do. And then I'm like, so you can't divorce all of your other experience when you are doing one piece of that job. You've got to do the whole job. So the pivot was easy because it made sense for me. And I, like most communicators, I'm a natural born helper. I want to help. If I see a problem, I want to fix it. And so it was a natural fit for me. And I'm glad that I made that pivot into PR because it brings together so many things that I love in one career.
Yeah, it really seems like the opportunity for you to help other people and branch out more from the writing was really just kind of handed to you. Like in having those conversations, it became very clear, oh, there's gaps to fill and I can do this. So why not just kind of, let my career evolve where the needs are? That makes a lot of sense.
I love telling my story because honestly, I never set out to be in business for myself. I really didn't. I just jumped into the deep end of the ocean with both feet and had no idea what I was doing. So all of the things that you're supposed to do, I did none of them. And so I always feel like, listen, if I've succeeded at this career and I've sort of built this PR agency that really fits me, I have a love of creativity, but I also love strategy and numbers. And so my what I do for clients may look different, but anyone can do this. And so I am a huge advocate of people really building the business that they love. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with status. It has nothing to do with how many people are saying your name. It's building something that really fulfills you on a deep level. And I feel like we're all able to do that.
Yeah, that not enough people do that.
Right.
I
Yeah.
also feel like in PR, there's so many industries you can work with. So if you have a niche that you're interested in and you love to write, you can go into that industry without kind of the background that you might need. It's a cool kind of niche way to get into it.
Well, Karen, thank you for that background. That's really, really helpful, because the way that we structure this podcast is we want to start off getting to know our character, you. But then we want to dive in a little bit deeper. And what I mean by that is any story is going to have, as you know, you're a storyteller yourself, but any story starts with a character and then there's a conflict of sorts. And so what's some sort of, professional conflict that you've faced that you think maybe the listeners might be able to learn from, regardless of the industry that they're in?
Wow. I mean, you stay in this business long enough, you see and hear and experience so much. But I think one story comes to mind that sort of frames this for me and has really helped me to see my career in a new light, has to do with the crisis communications engagement that I had. And there was an organization that was being attacked on social media. Groups had sprung up and organized to attack this organization, accusing them of racism. And some of it was actually rooted in truth, but which is, misinformation. Sometimes there's a kernel of truth, but then there are other things added to it that really now make it untrue. And some of it was the distant past, not what the organization was doing currently. So they brought me and my team in to help them to navigate this. Now, like every PR person, I would much rather be on the proactive side of being ready for a crisis than responding to it. But this was the assignment and we had to jump right into the fire, and it was ugly. There were lawsuits. There was just, people were coming out literally with sticks and fire wanting to burn this organization down. It was really highly charged. And so my mission was to not only address the crisis, so we had to create a framework for them to operate in going forward. We needed to address the systemic issues to ensure that that kernel of truth no longer existed in the organization, that everybody was trained, that they understood the missteps that were made. While the intentions were good, the outcome wasn't what they were looking for. So we had to train them to spot that. And that meant a lot of one-on-one time with executives and redoing the organizational structure and retraining people and having one-on-one meetings and talking about how you really communicate something and helping them to bridge the gap from what they thought was an innocent thing to how people perceive that in their audiences. And then bringing those angry publics into a situation where they had a voice, they had a forum to bring up all of their concerns to the people that were in charge of fixing these issues and hearing about the progress that had been made. In this whole ugly process, there were so many tense moments, and being the person that was assigned to fix this and work with this organization was deeply satisfying because of the work that we got to do on the organizational structure and really making systemic changes. But it also put me in the line of fire. So some of those attacks started coming at me personally on social media for representing this organization. And so standing in integrity and knowing that those people that are throwing sticks at me are also my publics, but so is the organization. And I need to balance this, and I need to find a way to bring these people together. It was draining. But we did the work, and it was successful until months after we were done with the assignment. And then the organization started to slip back into their same behavior. So the lesson that I learned from this is that we can have successful communications campaigns as PR professionals. We can check all the boxes, do all the right things, hit all of the metrics, hit the greatest outcomes and results. But ultimately, we have to remember that we're dealing with people. And when we think of people, it's not just our publics, not just the people that we are communicating to, but the people that we're communicating for. And I learned that this means that people will either surprise you or disappoint you at any given moment, and that changing behavior is not a one and done. And we have to keep that in mind. So as we are looking to represent our clients, our organizations with messaging, and as we're putting strategies together and we're trying to engage an audience and we're trying to build trust so that they will buy from us, so that they will see us as the authority, we have to understand that they may hear us and changes could be temporary, but lasting change really takes continuous work. You can never take your foot off of the gas. The moment you do, you lose all of the gains that you had. And so I've taken that with me into my work and used it to inform clients on their strategies, not just doing something for the now that you look at those success metrics and you're proud of it, but what are you really building for the future that's going to create lasting behavioral change, and more importantly, lasting trust and credibility in who you are as a brand?
I have so many follow-up questions now with that. One of which, though, is so you were brought in to help with this the comms crisis and everything. So you were not involved in what led up to that point. Do you find, in your experience, that to be a advantage or a disadvantage for you? Because on the one hand, I could see having more of an intimate understanding of the organization and what led to that crisis might be an advantage. But on the other hand, I could see coming in with a completely fresh set of eyes to look at everything from a higher level that maybe someone who's involved directly with it might not be able to have that same perspective. Do you find that to help or hinder you with your job?
I think it has pros and cons, right? The pro is exactly what you said, is that I'm coming in with a fresh perspective. I'm making an assessment based on no previous history with this organization. I did not know them. I did not know their people. And so I was really able to assess it with clarity, without any preconceived, ideas about who they were, whether they were right or wrong. And then that informed our choices. The con of it, obviously, is when you step into a crisis that's already erupted, it's fighting a battle. You really are in the thick of it. You didn't have that opportunity to sort of take down the temperature before it got to this level. It's heated, it's ugly, it's bad, it's out there, it's wild. And it felt like fighting the California wildfires with a teaspoon.
Ooh. One of the things that you mentioned that I think right now is a huge kind of, how do I look at it this way? You mentioned needing to find a space for not just trying to speak on behalf of your client in the crisis control, but also find a way for the people who are upset to have a way to voice their concern in a productive manner. And it feels like, regardless of what era it is, there's always a difficulty in finding that common confrontation isn't even the right word, but that common
resolution.
Yeah, like the common space to be able to speak and to say, okay, here is why I'm upset. Because you mentioned, like, everything starts with a kernel of truth, and then other things happen. It gets twisted, it gets distorted, so it makes you upset, and then you want to have vindication, have justification for being upset about this. So you, as a crisis communicator, have to come into that wildfire and say, hey, here's what the actual truth is. Here's what I'm trying to portray. But at the same time, let me know, like, let's talk about why you're upset. How do you find that space? Like, how do you find that? Because I know when I get upset, the last thing I want to do is sit down and be like, okay, so tell me why you're mad at me. That's the last thing that I'm wanting to do when I'm upset. But being in that heightened environment as the crisis communicator that's being brought into this situation, how do you find that ability to get kind of both sides to the table to speak about what's going on and learn, so that way you can take that teaspoon and turn it into a ladle, and then turn it into a bucket, and then turn it into a fire hose, so that way it is easier. And as you make those steps through and you make that progression through, you can fight that fire and eventually put it out like you did.
It was tough. So there were several parts to it. One was training the organization itself to listen, to hear, giving them the confidence that, yeah, this is going to be hard. It'll be hard to hear, training them to listen and not to react. Because ultimately, and anyone who's ever been in customer service, that people ultimately just want to be heard. When you're frustrated, you don't want someone to jump in and tell you that you're wrong or that you got the facts wrong. You want them to hear you and then to work together with you to find a solution. So there was, first of all, training the people that were going to be on the firing line. And it took a lot of work because, your instinct as a human being, when people are coming at you so hard and they're threatening you and they're saying these horrible things about you and your organization, it's a daily assault. There's a hashtag about you. There's groups about you, to say, oh, hey, now I'm going to put you all in a room and you're going to talk to them. Oh, and by the way, we're going to do it on the internet too. And we're going to ring in a town hall. How does that sound? Fun, right? But that's exactly what we did. And it's also finding there's always somebody in that crowd that's a leader. So you want to acknowledge that person, give them their respect, call them in one-on-one first and say, look, here's what we're doing. We hear you and we want to continue to make changes. We love to bring you into a forum so that we can hear your experience, so we can hear what your grievances are, so that we can do better to make these changes moving forward so that others don't experience that. Is that something that you would be open to? So we recruited champions from the other side to at least be that bridge. That's key. I think that makes a huge difference when you tap somebody that the other side, the opposition, really respects, and you get them to see reason. Like, hey, we want to give you a forum. We want you to come in and we want you to let us have it, because we can't change unless we really know what's going on. And then you give them an opportunity to air their grievances, and you don't say, you're wrong. Hey, we didn't do that. Oh, we didn't really mean that. I mean, we said that and we did that, but that's not what that really meant. You just listen and you agree with them and you respect how they're feeling, because it's charged with emotion. People are not always logical when they are filled with emotion and they feel like they have not been heard and they feel like they've been offended. So it was a tough process. And, again, our team took some hits in that confrontation as well, but we're communicators. We can do it. It's like, oh. Now afterwards, we were all just kind of like, did we just go through that?
So much of what you're saying reminds me of effective ways to handle conflict within just a relationship with a partner that you may have.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like when my wife and I, if we have a disagreement on something, both of us are usually pretty quick to say early on, hey, I'm on your side. I'm with you. I don't want to be someone that you're fighting against. I want someone to work with you to resolve this miscommunication that we're having here. And a lot of times that does require a sense of humility. So you're not immediately getting defensive, and you're forced to bite your tongue and not immediately lash out at something that they said or they misunderstood something that you had communicated. And all of that is to get back to kind of what you were saying, Pat, and what you were saying, Karen, is about finding that common ground so that the other side feels heard and then they feel respected, and then you finally have the opportunity to take what you had learned while just shutting up and listening, and then applying it to make sure that you don't have a problem like that again in the future. Ideally, doesn't always work in relationships, and it doesn't always work in the business world either if you backtrack.
But I think you said a key word, relationship. And we do have a relationship with our publics, but it has to be authentic. So when you are in a disagreement with your spouse or a friend or someone that you know, you really have the intention of solving this problem because you want to get to the other side. That's genuine. You're not faking it. I have also been on the other side where I've worked with organizations that had a crisis and they weren't authentic and genuine. They had they didn't care. They just cared about their reputation. They didn't care about the publics. They didn't care. They disagreed with them. They thought that what they did was not wrong. They didn't care how people saw it. Like they just wanted the heat, quote unquote, off of them. In that situation, you're not really going to be able to solve the problem because you genuinely do not care about the people that are upset with you. So that was a big part of our work, is really like digging deep and making sure that people got it, they understood, and that they really did care. Because when you go into a conflict where you truly do care about the other people that are affected, the outcomes are going to be very different. But if you just don't really care and you're just trying to put a quote unquote PR spin on it, which I hate because that implies that what we do is not genuine, it's not going to work. It may work for a second, but it's not going to last because you're never going to be able to live up to the fix because you don't care about it. You're not invested.
Yeah, you're not addressing what caused the disagreement. You're just addressing the disagreement at that point, which means that it's just going to happen again later on. You haven't done anything to move forward together. You're just trying to be like, all right, everyone shut up and stop yelling at me about this stuff.
Yes.
Yeah, when you said that you had to find champions on the other side, that was such a light bulb moment because, yeah, you need to find, I know the phrase is, perception is reality, and it really is more your perception is your reality. So if somebody is having an issue and thinks that, for X, Y, or Z reason, they are upset with this company, when you find somebody, that is well respected, that is kind of in those talking points, and you can find a way to agree or come to an understanding, getting those people to help get that point across, be in those town halls and be those champions, it helps to shift that perception that the root cause is being addressed and not just, you're not just trying to, okay, these flames are done, but the kindling is still lit and it's still burning. And that as soon as you just walk away from this and, okay, it could be a day, a month, a year later, it's all going to flare up again because something is going to happen because you're not addressing that cause. So no, this has been such an eye-opening kind of experience because you can relate this to almost any conflict that you're dealing with. And to your point and Alan's point, just relationships are one thing because for the most part, you're trying to find that resolution together, hopefully. And but then from a business standpoint or from an organization standpoint, that's a huge thing to think about and want to make sure that you're addressing properly.
I'm really hoping that there's at least one listener out there who's hearing this who went in expecting to learn about like PR comms and everything, and they're walking away like, "Oh, I could be a better husband, or I could be a better wife."
I hope that too. That would be awesome.
Right. And I am curious about something else. I don't mean to digress a little bit, but you had mentioned when we first started this conversation that you've been in the PR world for a little bit over 20 years now. And especially with regard to crisis comms, I have to imagine that as social media exploded over the last 20 to 25 years, and as more and more people feel emboldened to share their opinions publicly and loudly, how have you seen that affect crisis comms? Has there been like a huge influx of a need for someone with your specialty? And do you see that continuing to evolve over time?
Absolutely. And And it's why, with every client, we like to have a proactive crisis communications plan that covers social media. So we insist on social listening, because if you catch things when they're just bubbling up, then you're able to, again, turn down the temperature and manage it. But if you let it go because you missed it, you're not paying attention, you can't really address it quickly enough. And speed and accuracy is key these days because information spreads so quickly. And the information doesn't have to be right. Things spread across the internet so fast, and then it's out of control. So if something is happening, you need to address it. If there's something that keeps coming up, then there are things that you can do, such as having like an FAQ or having messaging built into, everything that addresses the things that people normally get wrong. But yeah, social media brought an aspect to our jobs that was beautiful, having a channel where we had more direct interaction with our publics. But the downside, of course, is that everyone has a platform and they can say whatever they want to say. And unfortunately, everyone is not as invested in fact checking or talking to, if you have a problem with an organization, not everybody goes to the organization and says, hey, I have this issue with how you're doing things. They take it to the internet. So they'd rather share it with, 10,000 people than one person and actually get it resolved. They want a platform. They want to make a TikTok about it. They want to go viral from it. So it's a fast moving business these days.
Yeah, absolutely a double-edged sword, because with so many people being empowered to have these voices and to share their opinions, on the plus side, yeah, you're getting so much of the good, and you're hearing about what's being done right, and you're hearing about what people appreciate about an organization. But then on the far other end of the spectrum, not only are you hearing criticisms, but you're hearing them in some of the loudest, sometimes meanest ways that people can imagine, because they have a screen between them and anyone else, so they feel as if they can say whatever they want. So yeah, from a crisis comms perspective, I see that as a blessing just as much as a curse in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I mean, I always tell brands that, there are two things that you can do to safeguard yourself. One is that you really have to live your mission, vision, and values from the basement to the boardroom. That means always operating from a position of ethics. Be who you say you are all the time. And then have mechanisms within your organization that listen when someone or some policy doesn't adhere to that. So you need to have those checks and balances. You need to not make it punitive. If someone speaks up like, hey, we're doing this and this doesn't really jibe with what we said we're about. And you need to hear that out and have a process for curing that internally. So if you're always ethical and you are so clear on who you are, your audience will always be clear on who you are. And that means that you're constantly depositing into that bank of trust. So if someone does attack you, champions will rise up to support you because you've been consistent. You are who you say you are. They know. Like, they're like, no, that organization would never do that. No, they didn't do that. No, they didn't say that. I don't think that's right. They'll question it. They'll share stories that will support you. And it makes it easier. Because no one can avoid crisis in this day and age. It will happen. It's not like, will it? No, it will. But what will you do? Will you be prepared for it? Will you be prepared when you're attacked? Because you're going to make someone mad at some point, and it's probably going to be more than once. And sometimes it's something innocent. It could be that you use the color blue in an ad in the wrong month of the year. And then all of a sudden you're like, we just use blue. What did we do?
Yeah, because unfortunately, it doesn't mean somebody attacking you on social media or somebody having a grievance and taking it to TikTok or their platform, to your point, because they want to go viral. Most of the time, they're not wanting a resolution. Most times, they just want to complain. They want to make money off of it. They want the fame from it. They don't, going to that person, or, as you said, going to one person and getting a resolution would be easier, but it's not as flashy. It's not going to be as profitable for them because they don't care about the resolution. They just want to be heard and make something from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they tap into other people who want the same thing. Like, I'm going to jump in on that. Yeah, they stink.
Right.
Were you talking about the same company? Because you just mentioned something that they don't even offer.
But also to your point, just as a quick aside, we're talking a lot from kind of a PR and perspective, but even from an investor relations perspective, crisis comms and doing social listening, we obviously know a lot about that from with our jobs here, but across the board, no matter what kind of corporate storyteller, what corporate communications you're doing, whether it's just solely public relations or you're on the investor relations side, keeping track of what's going on so you can see what is happening and get ahead of it. Hopefully, so it doesn't turn into a crisis situation that you have to deal with is hugely important, because a lot of times I know from my perspective or from my experience so far, a lot of times on the investor relations side, it's like, why do we need that? We don't, that almost is more important to be dealing with from a crisis communication standpoint, because you're dealing with a publicly traded company, shares, stakeholders. You're going to have so many other people that you're going to be responsible to in dealing with that crisis when it blows up. Because as you said, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when this is going to happen. Something will happen. You need to be on top of that. So that's a huge point to anybody out there listening right now, is be on top of things. No matter how you are monitoring that, be aware of what people are saying about you online, because it takes one video on TikTok that just happens to get in front of the right people to all of a sudden blow up and have millions of views and likes and shares, that now you're dealing with something that could have been, mitigated so much earlier on if you had been paying attention.
It reminds me how important PR professionals are. Like, you're talking about sort of the morals and ethics of a business from the beginning. And yes, things might pop up, but you've talked about authenticity so much today. And I think having that in businesses is so important, so that when these TikTok trends flare up, we're not worried about it, because your morals and your ethics are going to be where they were from the beginning.
You've earned the benefit of the doubt.
Yes.
Yeah. If you're demonstrating a strong code of ethics for for the wider world out there, then if and when there is, that one TikTok or tweet or whatever it is that starts to bubble up, it's not going to boil over, because, Karen, to your point earlier, there will be more champions for that organization who will have seen a demonstrated sense of consistent, strong ethics and morals. Will be like, maybe let's stop and think for a little bit before we all start joining hashtag down with whatever company.
I mean, I think that, that makes the case for, as you said, having the tools to be able to stay on top of these things. That's vital. But then for organizations to really commit to investing in that ongoing work that communicators do. We live in an age where people sometimes see, PR and marketing in the same bucket, and they see them as expendable. Both have very important functions beyond just the revenue. Beyond it can mean your entire business. So these are deep issues that these professionals are working on. So it pays to really look at this resource a little bit different and understand that it is a key part of your strategy, and keeping you honest with yourself and protecting your brand reputation. And without trust these days, because we already know, there's lots of data out there to support that brand loyalty is not what it used to be. People aren't loyal, especially in challenging economic times. They're going to look for another solution, and you're just going to be one of many. So, trust is super important. And one way to start that is by being trustworthy.
Karen, this has been fantastic. And I'm sure you have so many other stories. And I hope we can convince you to come back on a future episode to hear some more, because there's so much that we can learn from your experience. Before we wrap things up today, for anyone out there listening who might be putting off coloring on a coloring book because they're busy writing the story and they're thinking, okay, what can I do with these storytelling skills that I naturally have? What would be like one final takeaway that you would love to share with the audience today?
First of all, believe that you're good enough to do it, and that you have something that you can share with organizations. I am huge about leaning into your talents, into the things that really light you up. That's big, because when you find that thing that just brings you so much joy, you honestly can turn that into your career superpower. And that's the thing that you will be able to offer to to an employer, or if you want to go out on your own in a business, you really can shape it around that thing that you're not only good at, but that you really love, and that really just you light up when you talk about it. You light up when you're doing it. You could lose yourself in that moment forever. So don't be afraid, and don't feel like your career has to look like anyone else's. Sometimes we compare and we think, is this normal? But PR people do this. Well, you don't have to look like everybody else. You can just use what you have, be great at that, continue to develop it, continue to lean into it, shape it, refine it, find ways to grow in it, and fly on a career that makes you happy.
Sounds exactly like your career. You left the corporate world, went off on your own, and then really honed in on those skills. And here you are today. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.
Well, for everyone else listening at home, thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe or follow us on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, and check us out on LinkedIn. And Karen, please come back. We would love to continue a conversation like this in the future.
Thank you so much.
Have a great day. Bye-bye, everybody.